Was the tabernacle just a rustic tent built in the middle of a scorching desert, or something much more complex and extraordinary? Imagine the challenge: gold melted at over 1,000 degrees, wood that never rots, precise engineering and luxurious fabrics, all made without any technology. Simple shepherds raised the dwelling place of the creator of the universe, an impossible work with zero margin for error. What they built there was never simple. It was a unique celestial project. The materials used were the most precious on earth. The labor executed was extremely dangerous, and the people were completely ordinary. Every rigorous measurement followed the majestic blueprint that God himself revealed to Moses. There were no improvisations, no easy shortcuts, and absolutely no room for failure. This vast project was the earthly reproduction of a magnificent celestial pattern, designed in detail to house the unbearable and breathtaking presence of God's divine glory. But the people waiting at the foot of the immense mountain were not renowned artisans or great builders. They were humble men who, for many consecutive generations, knew only the brutal weight of servitude, the heavy mud, and the rough bricks of Egypt. It was in that exact moment that God called Bezalel by his very name and did something absolutely extraordinary. The Lord completely filled him with his own spirit, instantly transforming an ordinary slave into a brilliant creative genius. He received infinite wisdom, profound understanding, and a supernatural ability for all complex craftsmanship. However, the harsh desert environment demanded total unity. A single man could never raise the entire tabernacle alone. Therefore, God chose Oholiab to work side by side with him, granting both of them a truly invaluable and strategic gift: the brilliant capacity to teach and pass on this divine knowledge to the other desperate and unskilled people throughout the massive camp. Men scarred and exhausted by cruel hard labor, with hands completely calloused by slavery, began to learn how to carve heavy woods, mold gleaming metals, work with delicate fabrics, and prepare rare dyes. A wonderful divine precision completely took over those rustic hands bruised by time. They were no longer seen merely as lost former slaves. They actually became the highly skilled and master builders of a living sanctuary right in the middle of a desolate and unforgiving wilderness. To successfully construct the tabernacle with absolute perfection, God clearly ordered that many sacred elements be made entirely of pure, shining gold. But there is a fundamental detail we rarely remember. Solid gold only becomes a liquid material when it reaches an astonishing 1,064 degrees Celsius. How could they possibly achieve this extreme temperature, living as nomads in the relentless desert without the help of large industrial furnaces and advanced tools? Without mineral coal, and without any kind of complex furnace available, the brilliant solution came from the only abundant and rustic resource in the Sinai region: the acacia tree. That incredibly twisted plant, covered in painful thorns and seemingly useless, hid a valuable secret. Transformed into high-quality charcoal, its burning process became very slow, remarkably constant, and extremely hot, easily surpassing any other common firewood they could have possibly tried to use there. The powerful acacia charcoal fueled thick clay furnaces that were molded directly into the desert sands, driven by massive leather bellows that continuously injected fresh air. The roaring fire gained an absurd and terrifying strength. Strong men took turns without any rest to keep that air flowing, performing truly merciless physical labor, sweating heavily under the already unbearable natural heat of 104 degrees from the blazing sun shining brightly in the wide open sky. The heat of the flame was so insane and extreme that the heavy metal tools had to be held firmly with extremely thick cloths. And among all those sacred golden pieces, there was one in particular that severely challenged the mental sanity of any veteran artisan: the impressive golden lampstand, the menorah. The divine command was absurdly clear: It had to be one completely unique piece, exclusively hammered into shape, without containing any joints and without any visible soldering at all. A minimum mathematical error in calculating the internal temperature, a single, poorly struck blow from the heavy hammer, and that entire immense talent of 75 pounds of valuable gold would need to be completely melted down from absolute scratch. Facing that overwhelming and totally impossible fire, the ancient former slaves were being harshly forged right alongside the metal itself. The pure gold was transformed by the brutal force of heat, and they were transformed by deep obedience. While the gold took shape in the blazing fire, another fundamental part of the tabernacle was being prepared at a totally different pace. Silent, patient, and highly artisanal. It was the skeleton of the tent, the great base that would solidly support the entire construction. This massive structure was made of acacia gathered from the desert. For any Israelite, that seemed like a strange choice. Acacia was a twisted, thorny, and incredibly difficult tree to cut or work with smoothly. But God would never ask for ordinary and weak wood. He demanded the exact wood that did not rot, that did not serve as food for insects, and that bravely resisted the extreme heat and the terrible, violent sandstorms. It was a wood almost as hard as raw stone, a highly resilient species that survived in the exact same harsh desert where the people would wander for 40 long years. The brutal physical process of cutting and meticulously preparing those heavy logs was truly agonizing. They sawed, planed, and scraped the hard wood, while it tore thick splinters from their heavily calloused hands. Each individual board took several full days of intense physical labor to be completely finished. And when it was finally done, it was not the time to rest. It was the exact moment to start another piece from scratch, because they desperately needed 48 identical and absolutely perfect solid wooden boards to raise the structure of the sacred, holy, and majestic temple. Each main board needed to be approximately 15 feet tall. Each heavy piece had to be perfectly straight and aligned, even if the original tree was entirely twisted and deformed. The measurements were absurdly exact, leaving absolutely no room for any blind improvisation. The ancient slaves, who were very used to working with simple mud and crude bricks, were now holding primitive bronze saws. Transforming irregular logs into smooth boards was a truly devastating artistic challenge. But then came the single most surprising detail of all these exhaustive processes. These heavy wooden boards, after finally achieving the perfect straight shape, were completely overlaid with fine plates of pure shining gold. The original twisted wood was radically transformed into something invaluable and deeply precious. The common material was rapidly turned into something completely sacred. What no one would value at first sight became the majestic structure of the Lord's own house. From the inside, the gleaming, glorious light was entirely visible. From the outside, it merely looked like a simple, rustic tent covered by extremely rough animal skins. If this story makes sense to you, subscribe now so you won't miss epic stories just like this. An immense practical challenge lay ahead. That sacred tabernacle was definitely not a fixed temple. It had no heavy stone foundations, and it could not be buried deep in the ground, since it had to be dismantled very rapidly. It is exactly from this specific point forward that the fascinating project of the tabernacle begins to fully reveal a vastly superior grand engineering, which easily surpassed all the human knowledge of that entire ancient era. It was a completely temporary and highly mobile construction. But here a dangerous technical dilemma quickly arises. How to keep dozens of gigantic and terribly heavy boards, all of them coated in solid gold, perfectly balanced on the extremely unstable fine sand. Placing this entire monumental towering structure directly on top of the scorching sand was a completely impossible plan. The heavy boards would certainly sink fast under the immense weight. They would abruptly crash to the ground with any strong gust of desert wind. or they would dangerously shift at the slightest accidental touch. The people feared a great disaster. However, the immense strategic solution that God delivered directly to Moses was incredibly simple, yet completely genius. This brilliantly executed structural design fiercely defies even the experienced professionals of our advanced modern engineering. The incredible saving solution was pure solid silver. Each extensive acacia board, already widely plated with solid pure gold, had at its base exactly two complex lower fittings, looking much like two enormous metal pins. These precise connectors would serve as vital temporary roots so that the majestic divine structure would never fall to the desert ground. Each sharp, heavy pin of these great golden boards entered and perfectly locked inside a massive, incredibly heavy base made entirely of solid silver, functioning as one single base for each individual socket. And these famous silver bases were absolutely not small or easy to carry. Each of them weighed approximately one large talent of pure silver, hovering around a terrifying 75 pounds of concentrated metal. All of this strongly supported the provisional house of Israel's God. Imagine the impressive scenario: 100 extremely heavy silver bases distributed with precise millimeter accuracy across the scorching desert floor. They functioned perfectly as mobile support footings, precisely molded so each golden board would fit flawlessly. There were no fixing nails, there were no metal screws, and absolutely nothing was permanently attached to the ground. Everything worked solely through the exact combination of colossal weight, gravity, and a pure, perfect fit. But that alone would not hold up such high vertical walls. Something else was necessary. Therefore, God himself commanded the intelligent use of long acacia beams coated in brilliant gold that passed through thick rings fixed directly to the main boards. These heavy crossbars joined the massive walls laterally, transforming the entire immense structure into a single, secure and rigid body. It was literally a prefabricated modular system built centuries before our modern engineering existed. And the most impressive detail of this entire formidable story is that all of this needed to be assembled and completely dismantled very quickly without ever wearing out the fragile joints. They spent exactly 40 long years repeating this painful process across the harsh desert, assembling, dismantling, carrying it through the sand, and raising the glorious tent again. The heavy structure never misaligned and never lost its stability because every part followed God's strict measurements. The entire anguished crowd would only see the physical manifestation of the Lord's profound glory much later, when the sacred tabernacle was completely finished. But to actually reach that truly epic day, they first needed to place deep, blind trust. Hammer strike after hammer strike, the great majestic golden skeleton now waited firmly. However, God did not just desire some erected walls and fitted beams. The holy tabernacle desperately needed to be wonderfully beautiful on the inside. The interior of that spiritual dwelling had to be so absurdly beautiful that it would immediately resemble the divine heaven itself. And it is at this exact crucial point that one of the most formidable and extraordinary parts of that majestic project fiercely enters: the delicate crafting of the tent's beautiful fabrics. God did not ask the artisans for any common cotton cloth. He demanded the most complex and refined weave humanity knew back then, very fine linen intertwined with angels. There was the wonderful presence of absolutely rare colors, threads in shades of vibrant blue, deep purple, and intense crimson, each color possessing a very powerful meaning. However, an inevitable historical question arises right here. How could they obtain such incredibly expensive and rare dyes, living as complete exiles in the middle of that desolate desert? The brilliant blue and lush purple were pure pigments made by crushing the vital glands of specific marine mollusks from far away. Each tiny living drop of that marine pigment cost much more than several heavy silver coins. The people camped in the hot Sinai, very far from the blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea, distant from ancient Phoenicia, and completely isolated from all the wealthy trade routes of that time. So where did so much incredibly valuable material come from? The clear answer is written in the book of Exodus. These noble fabrics and rare threads came hidden as valuable spoils rescued out of dark Egypt. The glorious riches were desperately handed over on the terrible, dark night of the famous Passover, when the utterly terrified Egyptians strongly begged the Hebrew people to leave immediately. However, simply holding the valuable raw materials in their hands was not nearly enough. It was absolutely necessary to know how to transform them with unparalleled mastery. And this delicate, magnificent work beautifully fell to those whom our Holy Bible calls today all the incredibly skilled women. These fantastic female artisans spun loose threads, dyed pure white cloths, and patiently dried everything under the blazing sun, repeating the heavy process dozens of exhausting times until they perfectly achieved the exact same color God asked for at the start. The wonderful sacred interior of the sumptuous tabernacle was entirely woven with dozens of imposing cherubim, but these highly impressive celestial figures were absolutely not just some simple and common applied embroideries on top. The original text points out that the great angels were an inseparable part of the sacred fabric's immense complex structure, appearing directly in the noble cloth as it quickly took shape. This required a lot of highly precise mathematics, impeccable preventive mental planning, and an extraordinarily ingenious type of loom. A miserable and tiny mathematical calculation error in a single colored thread, and the great cherub would fatally appear crooked, ruining months of exhausting dedication. The brave women of the desert, without any manuals or technical diagrams, created the exact equivalent of luxurious royal tapestries inside a very rustic tent. The magnificent visual result was truly breathtaking for any human eye. On the outside, the great tabernacle just looked like a common tent heavily covered with thick animal skins, but anyone who stepped inside saw the illuminated heaven itself. Cherubim reflecting the menorah flames revealed the eternal hidden beneath the ordinary. While the delicate fabrics were being finished, the high priest's majestic garments were created. They were not merely symbolic clothes, but real and vital spiritual survival equipment. Entering the breathtaking presence of God was an act of extreme mortal risk. A single human mistake would cause his instant death. The man wore the great breastplate of judgment, carrying on his heart 12 precious stones that represented the entire heavy weight of a nation. Israel entered with him. The deeply unsettling garment featured a beautiful blue robe with small, solid gold bells on the lower hem. These bells were, quite literally, a powerful life monitor for everyone waiting outside. As long as they violently rang, the people knew he was still breathing. Absolute silence would be incredibly fatal and desperate. On his forehead, the leader wore an immaculate gold plate saying, "Holiness to the Lord." The grand assembly began on the first day of the first month of the second year. Strong men perfectly aligned the massive silver bases. The heavy gold boards were raised without any margin for structural error. The beautiful sacred fabrics were carefully stretched over them. Inside the thick veil, the glorious Ark of the Covenant took its rightful place. The sumptuous menorah shined. Everything was completely ready. But something was missing. Would the Lord accept that house? Suddenly, a thick, dense cloud descended from above, violently filling the tent with intense glory. The simple tent officially became the sacred dwelling of the living God and the great center of the universe for all Israel. When the divine cloud finally rose, the entire immense nation powerfully marched. When it stopped, The holy camp rested in the deep desert. That impressive tent safely guided those people for 40 continuous years, but it was not the definitive grand plan yet. How did a rustic tent inspire the splendid Temple of Solomon? This story continues next video. Subscribe.